Hey friends, this week on Birds of a Feather Talk Together, we're joined by zoologist and science communicator Christian Flores, better known as Crikey It's Christian on social, for a deep dive into the California Condor. Once soaring alongside mammoths, saber-toothed cats, and other Ice Age megafauna, California condors have survived for tens of thousands of years, only to come perilously close to extinction in the 1980s. In this episode, we explore how one of North America's most iconic birds was saved through one of the most ambitious wildlife recovery programs ever attempted. Field Museum ornithologists and curators of birds John Bates and Shannon Hackett join me, RJ, and my wife Amanda, alongside Christian, to discuss the California Condor. We also dive into the condor's incredible evolutionary history, what North America looked like when they shared a landscape with mammoths and saber-toothed cats, and how scientists and conservationists are working to ensure their future. When Christian joined us, he was asking about the Pokemon exhibit at the Field Museum, so we touched on that briefly before we got into the episode, so bear with us. But we get to the California Condor pretty quickly. Okay, let's grab our binoculars and let's get into it.
The first day I came back.
Yeah, Christian, we'll introduce you in a second, but we'll get to the Pokemon stuff.
I was just completely not prepared. The first day I came back and I walked up the stairs of the museum, there were several hundred people dressed in black with their faces in their phones. You should only do that if there's like a weather emergency, a tornado alert. Okay, your phone goes off, you look at your phone. But there were so many people. And then they would all get up at the same time, basically, and start walking in a line, which clearly means someone knew where something was, and they were all following in a line to pick up whatever the something was, which I don't even know. And now I'm worried that they're all going to die on the streets because they're not paying attention. There are buses going by and cars going by. They're stepping out into the street. They're smashing into people.
Yeah.
So you understand this, do you?
Well, besides the event itself, okay, I don't understand that part necessarily, but basically, besides the actual fossil event, there's this game on your phone called Pokemon Go. I feel like I'm explaining this to my parents. I had to tell my parents this as well.
You are.
And so there's this game on your phone called Pokemon Go, Shannon, and then you basically play on your phone. It's a mobile game, and then you get to go catch Pokemon. But you guys are doing an event there where you get exclusive things in the game because of the event.
Yeah.
I don't play Pokemon Go. I'm only there because I want to see the cool statuettes. And
I'm impressed that you were able to describe it as well as anybody I've heard do it. So this is.
I agree.
But I played.
Right. That explains why they're all walking together like a pack. So someone, because they're all talking when they're doing this. Oh, it's over here. You need to come over here. We need to go that way. So they're all following each other, right? Because they found something special.
Yeah. And it's also not uncommon for people to have multiple cell phones.
Well, yeah, that too. For me,
wait,
I just
like one for Pokemon and one for real life, or are both in the Pokemon? They're both. Okay.
I have no idea.
I played the regular video games growing up. So yeah, I never played Pokemon Go, but I played the regular video games where, again, you go out and you pick a Pokemon, and then the fossil Pokemon, as I was saying before, you get a fossil, a scientist revives it, and then you get the Pokemon that you want out of it. There's one based off Tyrannosaurus and other ones.
So when you say a scientist revives it, does that mean that there's somebody in a museum somewhere that's actually clicking on stuff or is it actually a virtual scientist reviving
Yeah,
it?
so you go in the game, there are like the characters. There's a character that's a paleontologist or scientist, and they revive it for you in their machine. And then you get your Pokemon that you got the
And what do
fossil
they
from,
do
so.
afterward? After you've, brought them back to life.
So now it's just your Pokemon that, now it's back to life. It's your Pokemon that you can add on your team with its abilities and things it can do to battle other people. So
yeah, it is really.
John, before you got on, Christian was telling us that he knows Ellen Weatherford too, who I believe is Ellen coming just for the Pokemon exhibit next week? That's why she's in town, right?
Yep.
That's awesome.
Well,
That's
you
wild.
might see me in Chicago as well, guys. So
That's nice.
Look us up if you
so.
come.
Oh yeah,
I
I'll
mean,
definitely reach out for sure.
That's awesome.
So Christian, we're really excited to have you on. Thanks for reaching out, and I know I know you picked the California Condor that you wanted to talk about, but before we kind of get into the bird, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, so I'm Christian Flores. I go by Crikey It's Christian on my social media channels, mainly Instagram and YouTube, and I'm a wildlife educator where I discuss elements of biology, zoology, even paleontology, like fossil Pokemon sometimes. And basically, I speak to broader audiences and the public to gain more appreciation for life on our planet, both past and present. And so professionally, I'm a zoologist. My specific field or discipline is animal welfare and conservation. Most people would kind of understand as a animal care specialist or a zookeeper. That's my career. And within that, I've worked with mammals, reptiles, and birds. So in mammals, I've worked with kangaroos and wallabies. I've been cross-trained with red pandas and capybaras, really cute, cuddly stuff. Reptiles, I've worked with lizards, snakes, turtles, and tortoises. And then on the bird side of it, I've worked with seabirds like pelicans, gulls, grebes, and loons. I've worked with flightless birds. So for any listeners who might be wondering, my favorite bird in the world is actually the southern cassowary, which you guys did a great episode with Wes Larson, who he and I are familiar with each other. And then I've also worked with birds of prey. So hawks, owls, turkey vultures, and I've also briefly worked with California condors, which brings us here today.
What made you do that? How did you get started? You started as a zookeeper, right?
Mm,
And then kind of branched out in the education world
yeah.
from there. So did you want to do that when you were a little kid?
Mhm. Well, basically, definitely. Obviously, I've binged every episode of you guys. So you've talked about your son and how he was super into sports. I mean, kids gain passions. And I think that's so important. And obviously, as kids grow up and become adults, sometimes they evolve their passions or some just kind of die off. But for me, it just never left. And so for me, I always knew I wanted to work with wildlife at some capacity, whether it was, again, a zookeeper or something along those lines. Once I finally kind of left high school, I was thinking of becoming a teacher, either biology or health science. And so I actually was going to community college for some time, but really my goals kind of shifted and I really found that I wanted to continue following my passion. So I was going to become a teacher for some period of time, but then decided I wanted to take on animals full on. So then I got my first job working with a zoo, actually in guest services to begin with, and then kind of really worked myself into becoming into animal care. And then the social media thing was kind of parallel, kind of at the same time. And, long story short, this is where we are today. So,
Yeah, being a grown-up isn't all it's cracked up to be.
Awesome.
yeah, we've all figured that
But
out.
I'm
it
into
can be.
prolonged
what-
adolescence because the grown-up parts of my
Sure.
job are the least fun. So
Well, I think to add on to that, Shannon, I feel like for me, and I think what I've always kind of pushed, 'cause I've done children's programming as well, where I talked with kids about, what they can learn about wildlife, but also an overarching message. So I used to run a educational program with kids called Kids and Creatures, so very creatively named. And we did one talk on bears, about the different bears of the world, but also being a responsible camper and not leaving trash out, being responsible when you're out in the wilderness and stuff like that. I did another one on crocodilians of the world, but also, our water and why water is important across the planet. So to really get kids involved in wildlife, animal science, and a better just appreciation or wanting to look deeper into our natural world, I think is what really sparks a lot of creativity and just caring about the bigger picture. So,
yeah,
Yeah.
I admire that. I think you're right too.
Well, we've wanted to do a California Condor episode for a while now, and you reached out and that was the bird that you chose. So I just wanted to kick it off. Like, what was it about California Condor that, you wanted to talk about in general, and why'd you pick that bird? Because this is going to be a really interesting discussion.
yeah. Well, I think the short version is being an educator. I love animals with bad PR. When it comes to, again, reptiles, birds, there are people who are generally just afraid of pigeons, And so then when you go into the vulture world or animals like that, people think vultures are gross and disgusting and they don't add anything to the environment, when this is the species. Vultures are the species to be adding onto the environment and why they're just so important. And so, again, when we talk about these animals that people build these certain perceptions on, one of the things I really talk about in my educational side is bringing fear into fascination. And California condors, again, this is such a remarkable story of where they were and where they are today that I had to cover them. They rock. They're so great.
Awesome.
Yeah,
And so for people that aren't familiar, do you want to just give a little background on the California Condor?
for sure. So California condors are North America's largest flying bird. These are animals with wingtip to wingtip can reach around 7 to nearly 10 feet. I'm 5'9". And so thinking that a bird can stretch its wings out and still kind of engulf an average human being is a crazy thought. As far as their appearance, they're mostly black in color. Some California condors can have these sort of very dark chocolate brown wing feathers, but for the most part, they're going to look black. And like most vultures, they're bald in their face. And so their facial skin can be a vibrant pink, it can be orange, red, yellow, lavender, purple. Like they're a lot more colorful than what most people realize. And part of that is because of their hormones when they're trying to do courtship and breeding, to stress levels, and even age. Young California condors are normally sort of gray or black in their facial skin, but as they get older, then become that sort of mature, colorful look and colors that I mentioned before. And then as far as their, overall relation as vultures, they're a New World vulture, which you guys have talked about with your prominent vulture episode and other episodes as well. And so for our listeners, again, I think it's good to reiterate, there's the New World vultures and the Old World vultures. Your Old World vultures are going to be griffin vultures, bearded vultures, Egyptian vultures, animals from Africa and Eurasia. And John and Shannon, I don't know if you know this, but there actually were remains of a Old World vulture found in Australia as well.
Oh, that's fascinating you're saying that, because I was just in Australia, and one of the things I was struck by was realizing that Australia and New Zealand have no vultures.
Oh, wow.
And so the scavenging is done by birds like wedge-tailed eagle. And we were driving down the road, and I see this bird coming the other way. And I think of eagles as having these really flat wingspan, wing settings when they're soaring. And this thing had a really clear dihedral. And I looked at it and I thought, geez, if I was in the U.S., I wouldn't look twice at that. That would be a turkey vulture.
Yeah.
And it's this wedge-tailed eagle just cruising along the road. And so, yeah, no, it's interesting that I did not know that there was a fossil from Australia. And that's I wonder, you wonder, well, given California Condor's story, you wonder why that bird went extinct.
Oh, we'll touch on that. I have that prepared. Don't worry.
Cool.
But
Nice.
I know, Shannon, you also care about the entomology. The genus name is Cryptogyps. It means hidden vulture. I think because they didn't expect it to be in Australia, so the hidden vulture
that makes
Cryptogyps.
sense.
But that's a really cool species. But as far as our New World vultures, we have the California Condor, Andean condors, turkey vultures, king vultures. Those are all of our New World South America and North America species. And then if you're looking for California condors, you'll normally find them in parts of Northern California, Southern California, Utah and Arizona, and then parts of Baja California as well. And if you're trying to spot them, I've never seen a California condor in the flesh just yet, in the wild at least, which is a big lifer for me. And I don't have to go too far for that, but I really want to see one. And if you're trying to spot them, though, they're often confused for turkey vultures. So the ways you can at least tell the difference is that one size, California condors are massive, like I said, that 8 to nearly 10-foot wingspan, while turkey vultures are more 5 to 6 foot-ish range. And then if you were to be spotting them with your binoculars or looking up, California condors have these 2 long triangles running the length of the underside of their wing. So that's at least some ways you can tell. And all California condors, again, we'll go to their story in just a sec, all have a wing tag. So it almost looks like a placard. It's this sort of wing tag that's attached to their wing, and it doesn't damage their ability to fly. And each wing tag has a color and numbers associated with it. And there are even websites that you can look up. I think one's called Condor Tracker, that if you look up the animal you saw, it'll give you a small bio of that specific animal and its history leading up to where you found it. So
Crazy.
But we should talk a little bit about the background of all this, because this was a bird that, to be honest with you, when I was a kid, I was absolutely convinced was going to go extinct. And the Fish and Wildlife Service made a decision that they were going to catch, they were down to like 27 birds, and they were going to catch the ones that were still in the wild. And I actually went out to California and sat on some hill 2 miles away from the place where they were trying to catch the last 6.
Oh, wow.
And there for, I don't know, it seemed like half a day watching golden eagles and other things come over. And then suddenly at one point, this giant bird sails over with these, white primaries. And it's just like, it's amazing to think that, but my thought was they would catch these birds and they lay one egg at a time. It makes no sense that bringing it into captivity, a bird like this would necessarily result in the kind of success they've had. It turns out that basically every egg that's laid these days is hatchable by what they know in terms of the rearing for them. And so, yeah, the population, I think, is up over 250 birds now, I think. Is that right?
Yeah, in total,
Is it?
we have around 600 birds
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
wow.
Yeah.
if you had told me that was going to be remotely possible, given the biology of that bird back when they were trying to catch those last six, I just wouldn't have believed it. I mean, it's an amazing. You were talking about your interest in animal rearing and animal care, and the people that figured out how to care for these birds and make them so successful in captivity absolutely saved that bird from extinction. It's an incredible story.
But I think that's a great segue, though, into the actual story aspect of it. Because, if we were to hop in a time machine, I would take us back all the way to 2 million to 11,000 years ago. And so that's a time of the planet called the Pleistocene, geological time period where the entire world is a little bit different than what we know today, especially North America. On the North American landscape, you have mammoths, Columbian mammoths, as well as mastodons, saber-toothed cats, different species of horses, bison, camels, and more, because all of this megafauna that was once on the landscape was throughout all of North America. And because of that, California condors and other extinct vulture species were the cleanup crew of that. They were eating the remains of scavenged animals that, died, whether by natural causes or by predators. And so, similar to the African landscape, they fulfilled that similar niche in polishing it off. And so that also helps with anything that is, what's the word I'm looking for? Decaying on the landscape, possible pathogens in the landscape. They were consuming that, eating that, so it didn't spread out further into the ecosystem. And so as time sort of progresses, all of those animals that I just discussed then start to become extinct, whether by climatic change or human means, most likely a combination of both, where then, the mammoths and the ground sloths and everything else started to die off, and the California condors' range started to go down as well. A lot of people don't realize that California condors stretch farther than that. The name is very misleading, I'll tell you that, because California condor remains have been found in British Columbia, into Washington and Oregon, California, into Baja, Mexico, all the way spanning to Florida. Remains have been found in New York, and then possibly just throughout the rest of the United States as well. There probably were pockets where, habitat wasn't exactly the best for them, but they were widely distributed. But as these animals then started to become extinct, their range went down until they're now on the western side of the United States, eating kind of megafauna like elk and, other animals that have passed on, but also converting and adapting a lot of their diet to marine mammals like cetaceans, like whales and dolphins, seals, and more. So they were adaptable enough to take it on to the west side of the United States. But then as colonization happens, humans start to go on the east side. They then make their way and expanding forward towards the west side of the United States. Lewis and Clark, during their expedition, have accounts of seeing California condors as well.
Yeah, it's really
and so
unbelievable.
as then they took...
I have to say, one of the things about the biographies of Lewis and Clark is by the time they crossed the Mississippi, they basically started eating elk until they got to the Rockies. And so you start realizing that, oh my God, there were actually elk all the way across the central part of North America at that period. And so, yeah, it was probably, I'm guessing by that time, California condors populations had already declined dramatically across a lot of North America, but there was still, enough things like elk out there for them to potentially feed on.
Yeah. And so as this time sort of progresses, we hit, the 1800s, then going to the early 1900s. Hunters didn't like California condors. As they then started to begin their settlements, they thought they were a risk to their cattle or their livestock, thinking that they were... I can't even think about that mindset of like they thought they were a threat somehow to their livestock, like they were hunting them, when if you just kind of pay attention to them long enough, they're scavenging. They're not hunting anything. And so anyway, hunters would unfortunately kill them or sell their feathers and barter with them. And so that began to be part of their decline further. But also as hunting practices and guns become more accessible, we then hit the ammunition side of it, lead ammunition specifically. So when hunters would be shooting elk or any of their kills, they would be using lead bullets. And when a lead bullet hits the body and pierces an animal, they actually sort of fragment. And so those pieces of lead are staying in the body. So, for those that are not familiar with hunting, when you dress and sort of open up your animal, you take out the guts because that'll spoil your meat. And so the gut pile, what is called, is then left out in the ecosystem where anything can eat it. But the lead, the fragments, the pieces of it are still there. And so California condors, being scavengers, would be eating that. They would then be getting lead poisoning. And then not only that, feeding their chicks, those chicks would be in the cycle as well, being lead poisoned by lead ammunition.
Yeah, the interesting thing is that there have been attempts to get rid of lead out of shot, and they're on state by state level. There were some states who were more progressive in that than others, and now the federal government of the U.S. has made it illegal to for any federal agency to get in the way of having lead in shot. So we're going backward instead of forward in that regard, which is really pretty darn depressing because it's not just condors. I mean, condors are obviously an indicator of how bad it can be, but all of these species are being affected by lead that are eating things that are in that environment. It's really, I don't know sometimes. What's the matter with people? I mean, and I don't know enough about this, but
I mean, I agree with you,
does lead
Shannon.
shot make that much of a difference? Why is this a thing?
That's a great question, Shannon. And I don't really believe it does.
I actually think it's a little easier to work with.
Really? You mean when we load the shell?
Yep. I think it's, and I think it's also,
it's easier to use.
Well, it's just more effective. Yeah, it's hard to make the
I see.
well, for the kind of stuff that we used to do when we were collecting.
I get it.
That would be the case. No, but I just think that it really, I mean, it was easy to get and it was easy to use.
I think it was also cheaper, a cheaper metal compared to others as well.
Okay.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Right.
But that doesn't mean the hunters are going to like them.
True.
Yeah, they can be pretty stuck in their ways. We probably all know that. But I mean, not even just lead ammunition. It was also DDT, which, you've talked about before in episodes where DDT usage was not only affecting, they're eating marine mammals. So if they're eating whale carcasses and seals and whatnot, this cascading effect in the food web where condor eggshells were also being soft, just like bald eagles and golden eagles. So it is this overall food web effect that was affecting them. Again, alongside illegal hunting, people were not only eating deer and that the gut piles would be poisoning California condors, people were just shooting California condors before there were real protections on them. Because again, they thought they were a threat to their livestock. And so we then hit this point where we now have 22 birds in the world. This animal that was once widespread, probably throughout the Pleistocene, eating all this megafauna, then gets dwindled down to the point where there are 22 birds left in the entire world. And within that, that's where then conservationists and zoos have stepped in to say, we got to do something about this. There is no way we can let this animal go extinct. And coming from my perspective, and I think just the broader conversation, I think a lot of times people, when they think about a zoo, they think of it being either incredibly bad or incredibly good. There's no nuance in between of them saying zoos are torturous, where animals are in concrete and metal cages where they suffer every day. And truly, it can't be further from the truth. Sure, there's Tiger King and aspects of that, and there's the San Diego Zoo. And you can't really compare the two together. They're not the same. And so, I've worked with accredited zoological institutions where we fit a certain level standards of animal care, but also conservation efforts. And so, essentially, going back into the story time is that conservation organizations worked with the United States to say, hey, we need to do something about this. There was some pushback, and understandably, these are beautiful animals that need to be out in nature. We totally agree on that. But we have to get this head started somewhere before we can just let all these animals out. And truly, I would say, even John had a similar sentiment. These animals would likely go extinct if we didn't take any action. And so
it's still really audacious.
These 22 birds
right?
were then brought into human.
I mean, it's so audacious to take them in because they put up with a lot of. That's a bold move because you're removing every individual from the wild, and I guess people must have thought, well, they're just going to die in zoos then, and that'll be sad, just like the last passenger pigeon, just like Martha. But
no, I think the people that at the zoos were convinced they could actually bring them back.
The society must have been.
I think.
I mean, I was. Well, A, I didn't live here, and B, I wasn't, I was not paying attention to things like that back then, but there must have been a lot of newspaper articles. Was there a lot of controversy about this and a lot of public discussion about whether to do this in the U.S.? Obviously, it didn't penetrate Canada, so I didn't.
Yeah, there definitely was. And I think the bigger thing was, if you bring them in, can you even re-release them? So there have been controversies going forward once the populations were grown back up in captivity. Now they wanted to start releasing them. And so, for instance, one of the places was the Grand Canyon. And they actually looked around for places that they thought would be suitable. And I remember thinking, that's crazy. They're going to do that? And it's actually worked.
Yeah.
And I thought they'd have to continue to augment so for a while, I think they were putting carcasses out of cattle and things to make sure they had clean food to eat. And I was thinking, how long is that going to last? And the answer is, what? It was like, probably they may still do it in a few places, but in a lot of the other places, the condors are figuring their way around and
they don't
finding
really
deer
still
carcasses
rely
and things.
putting out carcasses. Chris, do you know how much they seed the?
I believe there are some places that may still slightly do some supplementation, but due to still lead ammunition in California has been banned, so the gut piles that get left there are supposedly supposed to be lead free. But with these 22 animals that were brought into human care, like you were saying, John, there is a multi-step process in how do you do this? How do you, again, I can totally understand from, if we went back in time, this seems like a crazy idea to try to get them back in nature and we're going to make this work. And so some of the aspects were how are we going to breed them? So California condors and many vulture species, they form pair bonds. So a male and a female have to like each other enough to make this work. And luckily there were enough pair bonds that started to then, okay, we like each other, we're now going to have an egg and mate. And now from there, what do you do with that egg? And so then they would have parents sit on the egg and raise that. But that's, again, a pretty slow process for this large bird to be laying only one egg a year. And they would take gap years as well. But one thing that they realized was that when a California condor loses an egg, let's say it's just infertile or it drops off a cliff and doesn't make it, the mom will actually lay another egg. And so when they realized this, pretty much a eureka-like moment, if we can remove one egg, the female will lay another in about 30 to 60 days. We have a window where this could work. And so from there, they would have the pair, mom would lay her egg, they would take the egg, and from there, mom would then lay a second egg in its replacement. And so now you have this singular egg with you. How are we going to do this? And so the very iconic pictures of them raising them with the puppets, the California Condor puppets came into place. And so the thing that we want is we can't have birds become habituated to humans. We can't let them imprint on us, because if they start to associate people as a positive, they're more likely to fly in areas where humans are, get struck by cars, shot by hunters, whatever it may be. And so the condor puppet came in as a way to feed the baby, associating California condors with a positive rather than people. And so that was at least one aspect of them being raised in human care. Once they finally get to a certain age, whether a few months or a year old, they would then be put in these flight pens with adult condors, where then they could almost learn from a real adult condor when they're given food. Okay, they have a little hierarchical system where when a carcass is on the landscape and all the California condors come in, there are more dominant birds that go in and they get the best pickings, and they will peck and push off the younger ones for them to kind of know their place, essentially. And so this was a very important aspect of teaching them how to be wild birds. Once you then get them to a certain age range, we would start to get them used to going outside and finally going out into the wilderness. But the other thing that they learned was power lines, electricity. These animals want to roost. They want to find places to, find respite. And the power line side of it, they had to then teach them that if you're going to go on a power line, they had these mock power lines essentially. So if you're going to go on a power line, it gives you the smallest little jolt, just enough to kind of make them uncomfortable and like, this doesn't feel good. I don't like this. And so they would learn to avoid the power lines. So that way, when they finally go out in the wilderness, they're not going on them, because being such a large bird, someone who knows that kind of science knows better than me, but basically when larger birds touch the power lines and make contact with two lines, they then shocks them, versus small birds like sparrows and such that aren't affected the same. So that's at least one part of it. And so this process now continues on. We're getting them used to the human presence in this new anthropogenic scenery and landscape that they're on, we then finally started releasing them back into the wild with adult birds so they could learn again to be California condors. And we could go into more detail, but that's at least a basic understanding of how the process was starting to work out.
Very cool. So, Christian, I had just a question about when they would take the egg from the mother so she would lay another egg, was that egg mechanically incubated? Like, did they put it in a machine for it to hatch?
Yeah, so it would go in the incubator. And so they would,
Okay.
artificially keep it warm and rotate the egg. Bird eggs have to rotate. Some reptile eggs actually don't have to rotate by comparison. And so they would have to be turned. It's a whole science. When I worked with California Condors, I was working with an institution that was doing not eggs, but juveniles mainly. So what we would do is we would have them with an adult bird, again, to kind of learn to be a California Condor. But one aspect of even feeding them was that when we would feed them, they were on a schedule when they would get their food for the week. But when they got fed and the food was offered, they had around 45 minutes to eat. And if none of the animals decide to eat within that 45 minutes, they don't eat for the day. And for some people, that might sound, wait, you're starving the birds. Wait, you're not giving them food. What's wrong with that? What's up with that? But again, when you're a scavenger, you have to have a sense of urgency, this behavior that when food's on the landscape, you can't just leave it there because it's not always going to be there. You have to take action and eat. And so that was at least one aspect, again, teaching the animals that when food's there, you have to take advantage of it.
Did they just naturally
Very
know that they were dominant over other birds of prey that might have been trying to scavenge the same things? Because it's clearly there at the top of this pecking order when they're on the ground, right? So do they just know this?
Amongst each other, that's one thing. But when conspecifics, other species, golden eagles will push off California condors on kills. So in the wild, they do have to not worry about golden eagles, but they are conspecific in the environment where they will try to chase them off for carrion.
I'm not messing with a golden eagle.
I love them. I think they're great.
They're not goats off of.
So the story I was telling about watching the story I was telling about watching this hill a mile away, hoping to see a California condor come down. The trap they made to catch the condors was actually a pit with some sort of mesh over the top, and they would put a cow carcass out there.
Whoa.
And so for most of the time that we were there, my recollection is there were one or two golden eagles sitting on the carcass, and then the condor just flew by. But somebody had to sit in the pit and actually be there when the condor came down, and then they would reach up and grab him by the legs.
Oh my gosh. Can you imagine that job? Jeez.
I'd like to meet some of the people that actually did that.
Yeah.
Gosh.
Yeah. I have heard about
Cool.
John, was that Arizona or was that California?
This was in California. It was in Southern California in where the last ones were. Yeah. It's a lot of people did a lot of things to bring condors back, and it's just an incredibly successful
I just looked
story.
at a paper.
Yeah.
There's a scientific paper out now. This is how far it's advanced, so that they know whether it's better to release them in groups or solo, how many you need to release to overcome one wild one that's not in the environment anymore. And so that's like real science. So that's beyond the hopeful idea of how you're not wishing anymore that you're doing it right. You actually have data to know that to know what to do. So I thought that was really, really pretty cool, that it was better to disperse the releases than to concentrate them all at once. So, I mean, that's pretty good.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And a lot of this wouldn't have been realized without the help of, again, these zoological institutions, from the Los Angeles Zoo, the San Diego Wildlife Alliance. Like, they're all part of this. And now it's branched out further where now the Oregon Zoo is in this and various other zoos, the Phoenix Zoo and such. We're all in this partnership of the preservation of this species. Again, 22 birds. We're now over 600. Again, John said it himself. He did not expect this to ever work. And here we are now.
Amazing.
Over and over again when I was a kid, I was just like, yeah, this was a valiant effort that was going to fail. No.
So, Christian, I wanted to ask you, before you said every condor out there is tagged and you could, actually identify the individual and follow it online. Does that mean I guess 2 parts. Are there any condors being born in the wild at all? Or are they all being born under human surveillance?
No, so now we are seeing, or we've been seeing for a while now, but now we have pairs that are naturally having their own young. But what they'll do is they'll recapture them. So they will capture a new bird.
Okay.
They'll give it its wing tags again, so it's in the system. And again, that's the identification way of knowing which individual bird you're working with. And so again, if there was ever some massive decline or whatever's going on, we can keep track of that, whether unfortunately, there are other states, like Shannon mentioned, where lead poisoning and lead ammunition isn't as well regulated, so that can be a part of it. Another aspect I didn't bring up till now is also trash and waste. These animals are scavenging, they're eating carrion, yes, but when they see, something that's shiny, birds are very curious animals. They're very intelligent California Condors, but at the same time, things happen. And so they would swallow trash, it would go into their crop or go into their stomach, which could cause impaction where, there are blockages inside their body. And then when they're feeding their young, they're feeding them trash as well. And so that's another aspect that was a challenge for them. And honestly, they still face today because people still unfortunately pollute. And so my education side, I can tell all our listeners now, keep wild areas wild. We don't need to be, leaving trash where we are. There should be leaving no trace. And that not only affects the condors, whether you live in Europe or Australia, wherever you are, it affects wildlife in general. We need to keep wild spaces clear of our waste.
Besides, all the microplastics get into people
And-
anyway. So if you leave things like that out and you don't put them in facilities who can recycle them effectively, it's going to end up in your brain. So
I was
enjoy that.
True.
I was quite impressed with how little trash there was along the roads in Australia and New Zealand.
Oh,
Oh,
I believe
cool.
it.
That's good.
And
Yeah.
unfortunately, in the U.S., that's still way too much of a possibility.
Why
in
do you
lots
think
of
that
places.
is,
Yeah.
John? What do
Mhm.
they,
Yeah.
is it just a cultural thing or do they have people picking
That's
up,
a good
more
question.
people picking up trash? What is it?
My guess is it's elementary education going forward into creating a culture where people just don't do it as much.
Don't do it.
Mm.
Yeah.
Can anyone speak to like how important scavengers are to like, the environment and the ecosystem? I know that it's like a really important thing to have them picking away at all these like decaying, but I don't really understand the full science behind it. Is there anyone that could kind of speak to that more?
Christian, why don't you take it? Because I said some stuff about it earlier, and it really is an interesting facet of things.
Yeah, for sure. So
Yeah.
California condors and vultures in general, even, the New World and Old World, are these scavengers. And so when an animal that may die from rabies or what other pathogens or the like, once they pass away and another animal eats them, unfortunately, that can then get that animal sick. And so these vulture species have evolved to be able to process anything from anthrax, botulism, cholera, these very intense sort of diseases and pathogens that if they were to leach into the soil content, that then could affect an herbivore eating that vegetation, carnivores going through the trophic scale. So it is unfortunately just this large web. Without vultures, we could start seeing more declines. And vultures in general across the world, especially the old world vultures, are in heavy decline right now due to poaching. And so this is more of a new world vulture episode, but at least as far as the old world vultures go, a lot of them are declining at these very rapid rates because people who are hunting maybe rhinos or other species will actually poison carcasses. Because when you're going after a rhino, you cut off its horn, whatever it is, the vultures are very quick to respond to that. They see a carcass on the landscape. And so if they put poison in this rhino, the vultures will die. There's less around in the area. So if they try to go after other wildlife, there's less vultures to basically blow their cover. That's at least what the old world vultures I'm saying.
So I just read a
Oh, okay.
stat.
Yeah.
So that's why they do it. I was like, why
read
would
a
you do
stat
that?
blew my mind that condors can withstand 100,000 times the amount of botulism, one of the most toxic bacteria, compared to a pigeon. And a pigeon's got to be pretty darn good at it too, given where they live on average now. So that is,
Slice of pizza and
yeah,
fries
no
and everything else they're
kidding.
eating from
Been
us.
laying in the dirt for how long? Goodness. So think about that. I mean, that's a lot of work, that is going into
That's
into
amazing.
cleaning the environment, naturally cleaning the environment.
And in places like Ethiopia, there's a commensalism with human societies. So, for instance, they have these things called abattoirs, which are butcheries, in the countryside. And if they lose the vultures that are around there that end up eating the entrails and the things that they're not saving, they have real problems with respect to disease and things coming into the communities. So no, vultures, as Christian said, like vultures get a bad rap, and they shouldn't, because they're actually an incredibly valuable part of
Look
the
at little kid
ecosystem.
videos if you want to know why vultures are villains, right? They always show them in a very villainy kind of way. Their little hunched shoulders and,
That's true.
beady, peering eyes. But I always tell people, it's like going into the bug room. As long as you're not dead, they don't care about you. They'll watch you for days until you die before they care about you. They're not going to hasten your death before they tear you apart. But, you're fine if you're alive.
But I think with that, Shannon, it's then, okay, these media and how we portray animals, people pick up on
Sure
that.
they do.
People watch that whatever old cartoon or movie where the vultures are just waiting for you to die. That's not what they do. They don't just, if you then die, yeah, they are going to eat you because, you're part of the landscape now. But again, reptiles, vultures, everything else, the sharks, they have this very bad rep of what they are when really they're a lot more complex. Vultures are, like I said, are incredibly intelligent. They're dedicated parents where they pair bond. They're great parents. They really put a lot of investment into their young. I'll even actually, you guys like critiquing nesting behavior for some animals. I will say, California condors don't build a nest. There's no sticks. There's no extra little bits and bobs. They lay their egg usually in a hollow tree or in a cliffside or in a cave. And then from there, they have their egg. I even have, let's see, in my notes right here, I'm trying to find it where I put it. Okay, the California condor lays a single egg in a tree hollow or a cave with no sticks. Mom simply poops an egg out and they take care of it from there. I left that in my notes for you guys.
Poops an egg out.
I love it.
All right.
I love it. I respect that a lot.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So
Makes it
Christian,
pretty easy when you get them in captivity, though.
say it again, John.
It makes it pretty easy when you get them in captivity.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. I was going to ask, how do they find carrion? Like, how do they identify, because they're so high up, like, how do they know where the dead bodies are?
Their eyesight's one of the greatest senses. So turkey vultures are kind of like a weird outlier. So they use their nose. That's why their nostrils are so open, because they have a good sense of olfaction. But for a lot of the vulture species, they're using their eyes. They're scanning the landscape. They're riding these thermals, this hot air that rises into the atmosphere. They're soaring on that, and it's very energy efficient, because if you're flying throughout the landscape, you're not beating your wings very much. It's very cost effective on your body to be soaring that way and basically surfing the air as you get to look for any carrion that you find.
And then they watch each other
too. But if vultures couldn't do that, they wouldn't survive, right? Because they're too big if they had to flap, basically the times they flap are when they get up and down from things. I mean, they can go hundreds of miles with, riding air, basically. So.
Wow.
And that's one of the things about the California condors that they've found out via the tagging, is that these birds, for whatever reason, do get up and go and travel hundreds of miles across California, and sometimes.
Do you think they have smaller home ranges than they used to before they were brought into captivity? Because they kind of got used to going back to a platform to get food?
I don't know if I have an answer for that.
Yeah, I'm going to guess no, just because, and I'm thinking of it more because I wonder whether in the past, with larger populations of mammals that are more broadly dispersed, they probably didn't have to go as far to find dead animals. And so, I don't know. That's just complete storytelling on my part.
Yeah. And I wouldn't want to be remiss, as well as we talk about the California Condor, that it's, it's cultural significance as well. So there are several different tribes that, throughout the years have looked at them as, a relic or a part of their storytelling. And so while I unfortunately may not be able to name every single tribe, the Yarok, the Chumash, the Wiyot, and Yakuts are at least a few that have it within their tales and storytelling and figures of the California Condor. So there is that element as well that makes it just such a vital piece that we can't let this go. And I'm glad we didn't. We were able to curve it. And, I love Jurassic Park. Well, I found a way. We made it work. And so.
Yeah, well, you didn't have to put a condor egg in a goose. And, some condor DNA in a goose to bring it
Yeah.
back.
I agree with you, Shannon. I agree with you.
So, Christian, going back to, I know you said you haven't seen one in the wild yet. Is it something that if you signed up for a bird, is there like a bird tour for condors that you could take if you wanted to? Like, or is it very, very rare to see one in the wild?
That's a great question. There are some areas where you can find them or see them more prominently than others. The Vermilion Cliffs I can't remember if it's in Utah or Arizona. That's one area where you can find them more regularly. You can go into Pinnacles National Park, Big Sur National Park. There's some other locations where you can find them more regularly or have, a better luck. But the Vermilion Cliffs, I believe, is one of the ones that gives you that you have a higher chance, not a guaranteed chance, but I'll say a higher chance. I don't want to misinform or anyone.
I want to
but
go
there
somewhere
are some areas
called
that are a little bit easier
Vermilion
to find them.
Cliffs. What a fantastic name for
Very
a
cool.
place.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
it sounds like a place you would find in Pokemon.
Oh no.
We've gone full circle.
It all comes back to Pokemon.
Exactly.
Day after day after day of
That's
Pokemon.
awesome.
Doesn't all this make you guys excited for the Guam kingfisher? I know they have like their own set of challenges that's
Yes.
completely different, but just like, I can't help but think about all the parallels and like zoos intervening and all of that. And, I know that the Guam kingfisher obviously has a long way to go and that has completely different challenges, but it's just like I can't help but
looked to
think of that when we go
have
through
you
this whole
look-
thing.
has anybody looked
Yeah.
lately to see if they've actually reported on any nesting success from those things? And
Well,
that makes me
we-
think it didn't go well.
We need to do.
I mean, because
Oh, no.
don't you
Oh.
think they would have said it
Well,
went swimmingly well, or at least it went at all if it did? Why are they being so private about that?
that's an interest. So what I would
Mm.
say on that is sometimes it's just because people don't cover it. So the California
Sure.
Condor success, I would say, wasn't really broadly covered in the press for a long, long time. And I remember thinking when they first started talking about reintroductions that I couldn't believe there would be enough individuals that they could actually do it. And it was partly because I just didn't know how much success the zoos had actually building up the population the way, Christian was describing. And so, yeah, I wonder, I mean, that island is out in the middle of nowhere and
Mhm.
the middle of the Pacific Ocean. It may be that news of what's going on takes a while to get out
Maybe.
just because there's no
Yeah.
report it.
I also think, I always talk to RJ about this so much. If you're watching TV news, there's so much you see on TV news that's not like a real story, and it's only a story because there's video. And Christian brought up that iconic imagery of the puppets, and that's like amazing. Like, I remember that. I hadn't thought about that in forever, but I feel like if there's a great image, then it's going to be big news. And maybe the poor little Guam kingfishers don't have good video yet.
But they're going
Yeah,
to
I
be
think for
cuter
Guam
than a
kingfisher, You have
condor.
a finger puppet instead of a full hand puppet.
Yeah.
They're definitely going to be cuter than a condor.
Seriously.
Sorry, no offense, condors, but you are not going to match a baby kingfisher
Oh.
in any
They don't have a Pokemon.
kingfishers. How do you
There's
know?
actually one. Wow, we really are bringing this into Pokemon. There is one vulture Pokemon.
All
But I
right.
don't know if there's any Guam
Awesome.
kingfisher Pokemon. So we're at least 0 for 1 right now, or 1 for
Oh.
0.
Yeah. Give
Not
that to
yet.
the condors.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
still putting my
I sense
I'm putting
another
my
museum-
cuteness dollars on the Guam kingfisher. I'm sorry.
So Christian, this has been so awesome. Thank you for coming on.
Yes.
Is there anything else you wanted to touch on before we wrap it up?
I mean, overall, I think for a lot of bird people are watching, nature people are watching this, and so I think for any takeaway message, it would be to keep sparking your passion, whether it's sports or wildlife. If you have a nephew or kids in your life, again, if they have this interest and they're obsessed over it, let them thrive with that. Let them continue to follow that passion, because that's where it led me where I am today. John and Shannon, you guys had your own passions. Everyone has their own passions, and they follow it, and they can take them to some amazing places. So I would just say, love the animals with bad PR. Let's help them give them some good PR, and continue to follow what you love.
Yeah, I completely agree, because when John and I hadn't even changed a diaper when we had our son, and John didn't change the diaper the first night in the hospital. He left him in the little plastic bassinetti thing without a diaper on. And I kept saying, you can't do that. They're not going to let us leave with him. We're too incompetent. You got to figure out how to get that diaper on him. Anyway, but I realized early on that what you can do is squash. You can't force someone to do things, but you can certainly squash their ambitions and squash their interests and squash their desires. And so you should enjoy your kids and go with the flow with them. Don't try to force them to be things they're not. And if they want to do something that seems crazy, like get in a car by yourself in the mountains of British Columbia and drive to Louisiana, you say you can always come home, which is what my dad always said to me, right? If it doesn't work, you can always come home. So just be that always home for your kids. Don't squash the weird and wonderful things that they want to do.
So it's cool to love Pokemon.
Yep. Full circle, John. Glad you got the stamp of approval from John.
There you go. Come to the Field Museum. Yeah.
You got me convinced.
But you better buy your
I'd love
tickets
to.
in
Yeah, I'd
advance
love to.
because you will not get in day of. I mean, it's sold out. The little sold out sign is in front of the museum every day. So get your tickets online.
Yeah. Quick question for you both. Do you have any California Condor
We
specimens
do. We
at
have
the field?
14 of them. Most of them eggs. Half of them are eggs.
No.
So and there's even some pictures of some. You must have photographed them for your egg book. Is that right, John? Is that why there are pictures in the database?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so they'll all date
That's right.
to the 1890s.
Oh, wow.
Or
Yeah, I wonder how many. I didn't look. I should have looked how many there are in the world.
yeah, I'm going to guess there's a good number in the sense of, I mean, good number. I mean, other places that have as many as
Do you
we
think
do.
Western Foundation has a lot of eggs?
Well, that's an interesting question. I could imagine that would have been something that egg collectors in the late 1800s would have definitely. The value of them is you can do things like really demonstrate that lead levels have gone way up in the modern birds compared to the older specimens back then.
Cool. Well, thanks again, Christian. Yeah, we appreciate
it's
it.
so
so
fun.
much.
And yeah, pick out another bird and let us know when you want to come on and talk about it.
Yes.
Oh, I got a long list, guys. We could talk cassowaries. We
go.
could do a
Awesome.
second round of cassowaries. We could talk bearded vultures, harpy eagles. There's a list.
Oh,
Sweet.
all right. We're ready.
Yes. Yeah.
Hey, everyone. Thanks to everyone for listening and for spreading the word. We continue to get new listeners every week, and it's because of you helping spread the word, so we just want to give a big shout out and thank you to all of you for helping us out. Next week, we'll be back with a brand new episode, so thanks, everyone. We love you all. Have a great rest of your week.